Come on in, welcome to Idled Out, where we talk all things Survivor. My name is Luke, and today we're talking about the oldest players in Survivor history. This is something Survivor's done pretty well, in my opinion. It's certainly better about age representation than, say, Big Brother, where their idea of representation is having like 17, 22-year-olds, and then like one lone 50-year-old dude. Survivor's even divided tribes by age 3 times. There's Survivor Nicaragua, where the tribes were divided along old v young lines, giving the Espada tribe more old folks than a mall walking club. There's Millennials versus Gen X, which explains itself. And then there's Survivor Exile Island, where they divided by age and gender. Although the old woman's tribe had a 32-year-old and a 35-year-old. Not sure this one counts, although I guess by medieval standards, that's kinda old. For obvious reasons, Survivor has to vet the health of their senior players carefully to ensure their safety in the game. So there aren't always a ton of older folks, but there have been plenty of players who played Survivor in their 50s, a handful in their 60s, and even a few in their 70s. Wow. Which Survivor players were the oldest at the time of playing? Let's find out. All that said, let's dig into the oldest players in Survivor history. At number 5 is BB Anderson, who was 64 years old when he played in Survivor Borneo. R.I.P. BB. BB is Survivor's original curmudgeon, a 64-year-old man stuck on Pagong with a bunch of 20-somethings. I don't think there was any point in BB's Survivor journey that he actually enjoyed himself even a little bit. And who could blame him? This was a guy who'd achieved beyond his wildest dreams back home. He worked his way up in life and became a real estate developer, started his own construction company, and was appointed by President Reagan to the advisory board of the Defense Intelligence Agency, where he served for 11 years. And he even declined several ambassadorships offered to him during the Bush 1 administration, which, that last one is kind of a weird thing to put in your bio, but pop off, BB. Yeah, and I would just like to everyone know, I also politely declined admission to Harvard. BB's a headstrong guy, a quality which served him well in life. It, however, was not an ideal quality for his Survivor game. BB was a hard worker, the hardest worker, but he didn't know when to turn that off. He worked sunup to sundown on the shelter and expected the rest of his tribe to match his unsustainable work ethic. And if they wouldn't do it themselves, he'd make them do it. But around day 5, BB had had it with Survivor. He couldn't relate to any of these people, and all the stuff that BB probably considered fun, like building the shelter, maintaining the shelter, and monitoring the shelter for necessary maintenance, was done. So BB decided to bounce. According to Gretchen Cordy's quarantine questionnaire with Dalton Ross, BB and executive producer Mark Burnett actually got into a shouting match on the island about this. The very wealthy BB threatening to call in a helicopter to come pick him up, and Burnett demanding that BB quit on camera if he was going to do so. You can't really just have one of your TV characters wander off into the jungle and disappear. That doesn't make for a very compelling narrative. Does it, Lost? Cooler heads ultimately prevailed and BB was voted out on day 6, per his wishes. While BB's time on Survivor was short, the 15 minutes of fame didn't end when his torch was snuffed. As a sign of just how famous the cast of Season 1 was, Second Boot BB was in a mega popular Reebok commercial. Hopefully, that puts in perspective how gigantic Survivor was in the year 2000 for those of you who weren't there in real time. Can you imagine, like, any other second boot in history ever appearing on TV again? Like, try to imagine Jacob Derwin in a Reebok commercial. Okay, that's actually not as big of a stretch as I thought. At number 4 is NFL legend and Survivor sure was there, Jimmy Johnson, who was 66 when he played in Survivor Nicaragua, but who turned 67 during filming, albeit after he was eliminated. If you're looking for good tribe leaders, you can't do much better than 2-time Super Bowl winning football coach Jimmy Johnson, a legendary figure in NFL history. Some cynics might call this stunt casting, but Jimmy was a legitimate fan of Survivor, and he even had a rocky road to getting on the show. His first audition was turned down by casting, so for anyone who's trying to get on Survivor and is having trouble, keep trying. Not even famous NFL coaches make it on their first shot. His second audition, he actually was cast for Survivor Gabon, but a health issue prevented him from actually going out to play, and he was replaced by Bob, the first of many lucky breaks Bob would get in the game of Survivor. Finally, here he is on try number 3. Jimmy Johnson knew he couldn't exactly claim to be some humble landscaper or anything. He's way too famous to hide who he is. So his strategy heading into Nicaragua was to play up the fact that no jury in the world would award him $1 million. It's a pretty smart play, I think, making him seem like a worthy long-term investment while also downplaying his threat level. For the first 2 episodes, it works. His natural leadership is desperately needed on Espada, a tribe which, despite being composed entirely of people over 40, is full of childish infighting and petty drama. Early Espada was defined by a power struggle for tribe leader. It's a real tale of two Jimmys. On the one hand, you have NFL coach, college football Hall of Famer, and Pro Football Hall of Famer Jimmy Johnson, who led the Cowboys to back-to-back Super Bowl wins. On the other hand, you have Jimmy Tarantino, some guy. Future Malcolm over here was obviously jealous of Jimmy Johnson and wanted to be leader of the tribe, which, yeah, no. Somewhere along the way in episode 3, Jimmy Johnson remembers he's a millionaire several times over and realizes he could be anywhere but here. He came for the experience, and this was enough experience. Thanks. While Jimmy Johnson definitely does not quit, Marty's on his tail, and he doesn't exactly go to bat to save himself. So Espada votes Jimmy J off unanimously as the third boot. Well, back to promoting 2 questionable American institutions everyone's aware of, but only the very elderly actually like: Extends and Terry Bradshaw. At number 3 is Joe Del Campo, who was 71 when he played in Survivor Co. Wrong. This guy's life is wild, even before he was getting it done at 71. He's not only a minor but impressive figure in Survivor lore, but also the true crime world. He spent much of his career as a special agent in the FBI, and was once partnered with famous criminal profiler John E. Douglas, which Netflix's Mindhunter and CBS's Criminal Minds both based their main characters on. In his book, Douglas tells a pretty wild story of his partner Joe carefully defusing an intense hostage and kidnapping situation with particularly good aim. On Survivor, Joe was on the Brains tribe in this Brains v. Brawn v. Beauty divided season. The original Brains tribe was split into 3 groups of 2, with the token older people, Joe and Debbie, in the crosshairs of the other 4. But Peter's ego is so overbearing and obnoxious that the old folks in the Geek Squad team up to actually take out Peter's closest ally, Liz. Thanks, Obama. At the swap, Joe traded up his closest ally, dropping Debbie and joining hips with Aubrey. From the merge on, Joe was basically a free vote for Aubrey. They navigated the post-merge together and got all the way to the final 5. Did Joe's game set the world on fire? Not really, but of all the older dudes who played an old-school, loyalty-based game, he's probably my favorite. He's genuinely just so wholesome and sweet. By far the best Survivor Joe. At Final 5, things are looking pretty good for Joe. He's at the end of the game with a close ally and has a clear path to the Final 3. He's probably not winning, although you never know. But it kinda seems like he'd be perfectly happy to lose to Aubrey or, honestly, anyone else. Yep, things are looking up. He even wins reward at Final 5. Steak kebabs, one of his favorite foods. Slow down there, buddy. Your GI tract ain't what it used to be. No, seriously, Joe, slow down. In one of the most bizarre medical evacuations in reality TV history, Joe eats so much beef that he is removed from the game. Look, the medical misfortunes of others are never funny, except in this case. Joe going so hard on steak kebabs that it causes him to get evacuated 5 days from the end of the game is pretty on brand for an old man. Well, actually, I guess the problem is that the beef kebabs prevented an evacuation. At number 2, and at number 1, is the legend Rudy Bosh, who was 72 in Survivor Borneo and 75 in Survivor All-Stars. Rest in peace, Rudy. Yep, the second oldest and the oldest survivor at the time they played the game are both Rudy. Absolute legend. And it's not just on Survivor that Rudy's a legend. This guy was a true American hero. He spent his career in the US Navy after enlisting at age 17 in 1945, was later hand-selected as one of the first Navy SEALs where he helped set fitness standards, completed 2 tours in Vietnam where he earned the Bronze Star for heroic action, and retired in 1990 after 45 years of service. Sounds like a pretty impressive life to me, and that's just paragraph 1 of his Wikipedia article. On his first appearance on Survivor's very first season, Rudy was an instant star. He was by far the most popular player of the season, and honestly, an underratedly good Survivor player. Unlike BB, Rudy understood that the youngins outnumbered him, and he's the one who needs to adapt, not them. Amazing that Rudy understood more about Survivor in Season 1 than some players do now. Rudy's closest alliance was with Richard Hatch. I'm gonna hazard a wild guess that they put the old-school military conservative homophobe and the out gay man on the same tribe hoping for drama, but they got the opposite. Rich and Rudy were instant allies, and they were in contact until 2019, when Rudy passed away. You might even say they became friends.
Not in a homosexual way, that's for sure.
If it wasn't the odd couple relationship with Rich that made him famous, it was his Rudyisms. There's no subtlety in the way Rudy talks. He tells you exactly what he's thinking in the least PC way possible.
You know, he's fat, but he's good.
Rich and Rudy formed an alliance with Kelly and Sue early on, and that took them all the way to the top 4. At the time, alliances were very controversial. Pagong and a lot of the viewing audience thought that they were unethical, bordering on cheating. And yet, despite all that, Rudy was still America's cranky, elderly sweetheart. Rudy ultimately lost the game at Final 3 when he was voted out by Final 3 immunity winner Kelly, who opted to take Rich to the end instead. But hey, day 38 is not bad for a guy who was born during the Coolidge administration. Rudy continued the trend of unlikely allies in Survivor All-Stars, where he played at the age of 75, as the oldest player in Survivor history, both chronologically and at the time of playing. Although Rudy's All-Star game was much shorter, he was the second boot, his biggest ally on Saboga during his brief time in the game was Rupert. Again, we have 2 people from completely different walks of life working together. And I'm going to guess that Vietnam vet Rudy did not have an innate fondness for tie-dye wearing hippies. While it doesn't quite have the same appeal as Rich and Rudy, the Rupert and Rudy relationship is cute while it lasts. Rudy's tribe Saboga gets off to a very bad start, losing the first 2 immunity challenges. The prevailing opinion of basically every single non-winner on All-Stars is that the winners should all go first, and that holds true for Vote 1. Rudy's all too happy to continue the trend after Saboga loses the second vote, and he targets Ethan. But by this point, it's clear to everyone that Rudy's just really old. Small tribes don't do physically weaker players any favors, and just due to his age, Rudy can't compete as well as anyone else. He's an obvious physical liability, so much so that Jenna halts her anti-winner crusade for like a minute to go ahead and send him home in a mercy vote. Mercy he did not want. In true Rudy fashion, he threatens to have his former tribe mates killed in his final words.
If I was them, I'd stay clear of me. I got a lot of friends. That's about all I got to say.
I love that these are the last words Rudy ever spoke on Survivor. It's just so fitting for his character. And no, he definitely did not appear in the Caramone reunion and say some not great stuff. That was just a fever dream you had. It never happened.
Only Rudy can get away with saying this.
Got nothing else for ya. To help me beef up my views as much as Joe's intestines, like and subscribe and I'll get you more Survivor content just like this. Until next time, don't get idled out.